The calendar is flipped to November, and that means to lock in for a long winter ahead. Welcome to Short Shifts, product of the NHL Wraparound podcast. Vic and Neil with you on Monday, November 3rd, 2025. We're back on standard time, and I know you've got seasonal depression. This is when it kicks in.
It does when it starts to get dark at 4:30 in the afternoon, or it's not that we're moving towards the shortest day of the year, which is, of course, December 21st. And then after December 21st, every day gets a little bit longer. All your daylight gets a little bit longer. But from now until December 21st, daylight will get shorter and shorter. And that isn't fun for a lot of people who like sunlight.
I'll tell you what, back in the day when I was working in an office, the first day after the clocks moved back was always the most depressing work day of the entire year. Because as you said, you'd go in, it's sunlight, and you leave 4:30, 5 o'clock, it's already black. So not a fun time, but we all get through it. And fortunately, hockey is there to get us through all of these long days that are ahead. But before we get to the hockey part, I know you watched the World Series on Saturday, and for a Toronto boy, that one had to hurt.
Yeah, I mean, not to the extent that it would hurt a real fan, but to somebody who's a fascinating onlooker, saw probably the greatest World Series of my lifetime, meaning that 7 games, the way it went, you never knew who was going to win. When going into the World Series, everybody was saying, well, it's only a matter of how many games the Dodgers will take to win. And the Blue Jays surprised everybody and left everybody hanging. And then at the end, as I described it, it was like, okay, the Blue Jays, they're going to win. The Blue Jays are going to win. They're going to win. Oh, they lost. It was that fast.
I don't love the fact that the Dodgers have a $350 million or so payroll, which is about 6 times as much as my Skinflint Pirates spend. But it was true championship mettle, putting up those 3 solo homers, a couple of great defensive plays, and then the double play to end it. So you got to give props to them, because as much money as they spend on their players, they came through when it was most needed. And I thought, like you said, it was a fabulous World Series. I'll tell you something that sucked, though. Commissioner Bob Manfred in Toronto, when he's presenting the World Series trophy to the Dodgers, didn't even acknowledge the Blue Jays.
Wow, that's not right.
No, can't make it right now. So the parade, I guess, is Monday in Los Angeles. All right, let's turn to hockey. The Eastern Conference appears that they are going to be heading for a dogfight from now until April, because at least the early return is every team is hanging around here. And the example is the entire Eastern Conference is at or above 500. That's NHL 500. As we know, that's different from true 500. 6 teams in the West are below 500. And the margin of winning percentage between top and bottom in the East, that's Montreal and Boston, is .250. In the West, Winnipeg and Calgary, it's 464 percentage points.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge difference in the two conferences right now. It's very unique, right? I mean, I don't remember ever seeing it like this.
So is it a matter of the East being that much better, or the East being that much more average?
Who knows? We'll have to see, but you can't be too unhappy in the East when you're playing over NHL 500, as you stated. I would imagine if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, who feel that they should be at the top of the Eastern Conference, and you're sitting in the 8th wildcard spot, you're not too happy. And if you're the Florida Panthers, you know you're going to have a tough start first half of the season with the injuries that you've got. They sit in the 7th spot in the wildcard spots. And if you're a couple of teams, Vic, that have got to be delighted with the way they're standing. Columbus Blue Jackets being one of them. They would be even more delighted had they not blown that game last night to the Islanders. But the Montreal Canadiens, the Detroit Red Wings, the Pittsburgh Penguins, dare I say, have all got to be, at this point, pretty happy with their start.
A 3-game winning streak does wonders, doesn't it? Because you can be in the 8th, 9th, 10th wild card, and then all of a sudden you can be within the top 3 in a division there.
Yeah, and it is that close. I mean, if you go only by points, the lowliest team in the East has 13 points, and the number 3 team in each of the divisions has 14 points. So you're 1 point away from not only being in a wild card, you're in 3rd in your division. You're above a wild card. So it is that close. And that's what makes the game so exciting. And as Steve Yzerman said on our show, it makes the regular season really important and all the games really important when you have the parity that you have.
And we come from a day when, of course, 16 of 21 teams made it, and you didn't see games competed at the level or at the intensity that they're competed at now. And that's only good for the game because the product is very good at this stage of the season, and it only gets better.
But I do think that they should expand the playoffs. Every other league has expanded their playoff format to some way, shape, or form. And I just think it's just misery to allow half of the teams in your conference to miss the playoffs and not have any shot. All fans want to see their teams in the playoffs, and we know that even if you are in the playoffs and you don't have that much of a chance, you get an extra 2 weeks. So you go from 8 teams in the playoffs in your conference down to 4 within 2 weeks. But that 2 weeks really matters to fans. They want to see their team in the playoffs. They don't want to quit at the second week in April. So it would be nice if they found a way to expand the playoff format.
But if you do that, and now with an 84-game schedule starting next season, and now you're going to throw an extra round because if you have a play-in round, I mean, you're going to do a best of 3. Is it a single game? Whatever it is, I don't think the NHL wants to be touching the month of July with the Stanley Cup Finals.
Well, they can worry about what month it is in the calendar. They can worry about having their fans happy. They got to get more teams into the playoffs. 50% of the league misses the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Not good. It's never been that way historically. Original 6, it was 4 out of 6. Then they moved it to 12 teams, and it was 8 out of 12. And it went on, and 16 out of 21, as you mentioned. And then they've gone with another 11 teams and no more playoff teams.
Yeah. Remember in the late 30s and early 40s, it was actually 6 or 7. So,
well, when the Brooklyn Americans were still in the league.
That's right. While we're talking about New York teams, you were at UBS Arena on Sunday. The October Rookie of the Month continues to shine. Matthew Schaefer with 2 goals, his second, with 1:07 left in regulation to tie the game with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then Simon Holmstrom 29 seconds later to give the Isles a 3-2 win. Schaefer became the youngest defenseman ever to have a multi-goal game, 18 years and 58 days, surpassing the legendary Bobby Orr, and the 3rd youngest skater overall in the expansion era, only behind Jordan Stahl and Pierre Turgeon. So plenty of reason for hope on Long Island.
With this player, yes, for sure. I've watched him play many games now. He's a very good player, amazingly good for an 18-year-old.
One of the games that I was really looking forward to this past weekend was the Ottawa-Montreal game, played at the Bell Center on Saturday. And this, of course, stemmed from pretty big brawl that the clubs had during the preseason, in which Dylan Cousins slashed Ivan Demidov across the hands. Fights ensued, and sure enough, in this game, Cousins was a marked man and eventually answered the bell, fighting Jaden Struble early in the third period. And Struble got the decision on this one. He got 4 out of the 5 punches in and actually knocked Cousins down. But it was a terrific game. Demidov made a little juke move to start the game tying play and eventually wound up tying the game with 2:23 left. And then Alex Newhook in overtime, after a dreadful blind pass by Drake Batherson in center ice. Canadians are 5-0 in overtime thus far.
And they're having a great start to their season with a 9-3 record, and they are really 6 games over 500 in real math, not NHL math, in real math. So great start for the Montreal Canadiens. I wondered whether they would be for real after sneaking in last year with a big minus goal differential, but they sure look good right now, and they're a +8 in goal differential.
I think something that is worthwhile watching as the season continues to go on is there's magic in the Bell Center. There's energy there. There's a feeling that no matter what situation they are in late in a game, if they are behind, they are going to tie it, and then they're going to win it in overtime. And that's something that we have not seen there in many years. It's almost like the ghosts of the Forum are trying to resurface now.
Yeah, and don't forget that in their last Stanley Cup year, which was 1993, how many overtime games the Montreal Canadiens won to win that Stanley Cup?
10
overtime games. John Leclerc was one of the heroes for the Montreal Canadiens that year. Jacques Demers as the coach, Denis Savard, Patrick Roy, of course, in net. It was quite a time. They beat the LA Kings in the Montreal Forum the last time Montreal won the Stanley Cup, and obviously the last time they won it in the Montreal Forum.
I was there that night. A lot of broken glass on the streets of Montreal after that. But the ironic thing was that they lost their first overtime game that playoff year to the Quebec Nordiques and then ran off those 10 in a row. So certainly harkens back memories to 32 years ago. I want to go to the West Coast now, Neil, because I've got 3 games grouped together. On Friday, John Gibson returned to Anaheim as goaltender of the Detroit Red Wings. He stopped 27 shots, but the Wings fell 5-2 to the Ducks. Troy Terry with 3 points, Leo Carlsson with 4. And then on Saturday, coming off a contract extension, 2 years at $6 million per year, Jacob Markstrom made 43 saves in the Devils' 4-1 win over the Kings. But then the Devils went to Anaheim on Sunday and lost 4-1 to the Ducks. Cutter Gauthier and Beckett Seneca with a goal and an assist each. Anaheim is 7-3-1, and you look at the young players in Anaheim, Joe Quenneville behind the bench. I think a lot of us thought that this was going to be the sexy team in the West this season. And so far, that's coming to pass because Quenneville's done a really good job pulling this club together. And, of course, the championship pedigree that Quenneville has cannot be denied.
First place in the Pacific Division. Who would ever think that at this point, 11 games into the season for the Ducks, they're in first place with a winning percentage of .682. And things are going right there. But I don't think it's just Joel Quenneville. I think that the addition of Chris Kreider, I think some of the other moves that Verbeek has made, the general manager, are working right now. And the Ducks are playing good. But you know what? We predicted that the Ducks would be a lot better. When you saw their moves that they were making and the moves that they had made, Jacob Trouba, for example, last season and others, you just knew they were going to be better and they would be able to score some goals. And I wonder if right now if the New York Rangers wouldn't love to have Chris Kreider scoring the amount of goals for them, as their scoring is sort of dried up, but we'll get to them.
Well, it's spotty, and we'll talk about their road trip towards the end of this show. But that ship has sailed, and so can't undo that trade.
And then, Vic, there's other veterans around the league that have changed teams, like Chris Kreider, that were long-term players for other franchises that have moved, and they're building Their legends, Brad Marchand, former captain of the Boston Bruins and now Stanley Cup winner for the Florida Panthers, gets a goal in the shootout winner in a 4-3 win over Dallas on Saturday. He returned to the team, of course, from Nova Scotia, where he was away supporting a friend who lost their young daughter to cancer.
And that was a really poignant moment because when he scored that goal, pointed up to the sky, and it was a great gesture for him to go back home to support his friend, JP McCallum. The team totally supported of it. And then, of course, him returning home with the heroics on Saturday for a much-needed win for the Panthers. On Saturday as well, Easton Cowan scores his first NHL goal. The Toronto Maple Leafs in their 5-2 win over Philadelphia. But the significance there was John Tavares, who had scored his 500th goal in Columbus last week, had kind of been mentoring Cowan on the ice throughout the evening. Rogers had some great clips of just the two of them together. Turns out that Tavares stripped Jamie Drysdale of the puck and set up Cowan for that first goal. But the best part of it, Neil, was Tavares' reaction, because you remember, and we discussed this on Friday on Short Shifts, that when Tavares scored his 500th, it was a 6-1 game at the time. And there was no reaction, no emotion. And when Cowan scored this goal, Tavares literally jumped into his arms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I guess they're all happy to see Cowan score his first goal in the NHL. And that was in a victory on the road in Philadelphia. So good for Tavares. He gets to celebrate that. How about Chris Tanev, who's a warrior if there ever was one? I mean, he is a hard-nosed warrior on the back line for Toronto. He comes back into the lineup after missing 4 games. But then on a hit by Michkov against the Flyers, he ends up being stretchered off the ice, and he's okay. He's back in Toronto after being in observation in Philadelphia, but right back onto IR for the Toronto Maple Leafs is Chris Tanev.
It was a scary thing because Michkov did not make a malicious hit. He was almost trying to go through Tanev to get to the puck, but the whiplash effect was what sent Tanev down on the ice face down. He remained there for about 5 minutes until the doctors came out, were able to flip him over. They stabilized his neck, and as you said, he is back in Toronto with the team, but on IR, and he's had concussion problems before. So considering the fact that he came off that injury against New Jersey, where, remember, he ran into the helmet of Dawson Mercer of the Devils, I'll be surprised if we see him back anytime in the next week to two, and really, who knows? And that would be a key loss for the Leafs.
No, it definitely would, because he is a rock on their defense, no doubt about it.
Brothers were playing together for the first time in San Jose over the weekend. Cale and Taylor McCarr, as members of the Avalanche, in the Avs 3-2 loss in overtime on Saturday. Cale had an assist, playing 25 minutes and 22 seconds, while his brother only played 6 minutes and 7 seconds.
And his brother, of course, is a forward, Cale a defenseman, but they did get to do it once. And as we said, he wore the number 16, Taylor did, which is double Cale's number of 8.
Call up, of course, from the Colorado Eagles of the AHL. All right. I'm going to have you put your GM hat on, because on Sunday, Zane Parekh, defenseman for the Calgary Flames, a 9th overall pick in 2024, played his 10th game in the Flames' 2-1 win over the Flyers. He had only played 9 out of 13 games prior to that. It was a healthy scratch in the last couple of games. It was a +1, 12:59 playing time on the third pair. By playing that 10th game, he uses a year off of his entry-level contract, so that means that the team will not be sending him back to Saginaw of the OHL. But if you're GM Craig Conroy here, was this the right move to make? Because given where the Flames are in the standings, I mean, granted that they did win a relatively low event game Sunday in Philadelphia, does he gain more by playing with a team that is going to miss the playoffs, but also perhaps with the knowledge that they're going to be moving some assets? And as we know, Rasmus Andersson is an unrestricted free agent. Is it better to give him more NHL exposure now in a losing environment than to send him back to juniors?
I think it's a lot less complicated than that. I think what it is that he's earned a job in the top 6 defensemen on the Calgary Flames, and that's would be in consideration of the general manager and the coaching staff, and that they've decided that not to send him back to junior at this point. Don't forget, they can send him back. It's not like they can't send him back. They've just used up a year of his contract, so he could go back to Saginaw at any time, but he'll only have 2 years left on his contract instead of 3. For all intents and purposes, it appears that they will be keeping him up for the year, or else they've done a really dumb thing in letting him play the 10th game. We can't make the judgment from the outside whether it's right or wrong. That's an internal judgment you've got to make on these young players. Sometimes in hindsight, we say, well, they should have sent him back. But that's all rearview mirror stuff. At the time when that decision's made, it's a combination of the coaching staff saying, we need him, and the manager's deciding what's best for the player.
Perhaps they get the best of both worlds here, because there is certainly the option around the holidays to loan Parekh to the World Junior team.
There definitely is. And a lot of times a player of this ilk will be loaned to the World Junior team, and then he'll come back and play, and we'll see about that.
Final item before we hit the injuries. There were 180 games played in October and 1 penalty shot. And on Saturday, there were 3. Kyle Connor scored on Artur Silovs. Lane Hudson failed against Linus Olmark, and Vasily Podkolzin failed against Spencer Knight of the Chicago Blackhawks. Elliot Friedman was calling out how he wants to see more penalty shots because, of course, we always see it in the shootout. But when it happens in the game, it still feels like a big event.
Not to me, it doesn't. They've ruined the penalty shot with the shootout. So, I mean, anytime that you get a player that's going to do that winding in slowly on a penalty shot, come in, and just do a penalty shot the way he does shootout, to me, it's an early shootout shot. So I used to love the penalty shot when you never saw that.
Yeah.
It was hard to get that, but now, to me, it's not even an exciting thing. It just happens. The goaltender usually stops it. Don't forget that in a penalty shot shootout situation, there is a much higher percentage that the goalie will stop the shooter than that shooter will score. Just in overall senses, the percentage is with the goaltender on a shootout.
Well, I certainly put that one up on a tee for you.
Yeah.
Injury update. Elias Lindholm for the Boston Bruins reported on Friday, had a collision with Jordan Greenway Thursday in Buffalo. He is now out several weeks after that collision. Carolina Hurricanes forward Seth Jarvis is okay after blocking his shot against the New York Islanders last Thursday. He played in the loss against Boston on Saturday. And Pierre-Luc Dubois, day-to-day, went down awkwardly after taking a face-off Saturday in a shootout loss to Buffalo. In that game, Dylan Strome did return and actually scored 67 seconds into that game. Alex Ovechkin, goalless again, as we still wait for number 900 for him. He will have his next chance on Wednesday against the St. Louis Blues. Any update from you, sir?
Star defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks, Quinn Hughes, brother, of course, of Jack Hughes and Luke Hughes of the Devils. The captain is skating with the Vancouver Canucks and is expected to join gameplay very soon. The other big name, William Nylander of the Toronto Maple Leafs, is expected to be in the lineup tonight. So that's the biggest 2 things I have.
And that Pittsburgh-Toronto game highlights 4 contests on the NHL schedule for Monday, along with Edmonton, St. Louis, Vancouver, and Nashville, and Chicago at Seattle. Tuesday, 10 games. And a couple that I'm looking at, Neil. Carolina and the Rangers. Rangers are 6-1-1 on the road and 0-4-1 at Madison Square Garden. They won their last 3 on their Western road trip after that disastrous loss in Calgary. Kind of a unique schedule in terms of how those games laid out, because they made 4 time zone changes, first leaving from New York to go to Calgary, Mountain Time. Then they played in Vancouver, Pacific Time, back to Edmonton, Mountain Time, and then out to Seattle to wrap up the road trip. So all told, 7,000 miles on that trip. Do you ever remember one when you were GM traveling and doing the zigzagging across the continent?
The funny part is that it's hard to remember this for everybody else, but even the year we won the Stanley Cup, 1994, we were still flying commercial. Mm-hmm. Not in the playoffs, but during the season, we were taking commercial flights all over the place. So, and those have to be really well planned out. You don't just get up and leave whenever you want to. You've got to go by the commercial flight schedules. I don't remember, other than, we would go out and do the trips in the West. You would hit one team after the next until you got it over with and flew back. But I don't remember going to Alberta and then to California and then back to Alberta and then over to Manitoba and so on and so forth. I don't remember doing that much of that.
Other games on the slate: Edmonton and Dallas, a rematch of Western Conference Finals of yore. Tampa Bay at Colorado, rematch of the 2022 Stanley Cup Final. And a couple of upstart teams going to get some real good tests against the last 3 Stanley Cup champions, Detroit at Vegas and Florida at Anaheim. So I'll be looking at those 2 games late on Tuesday.
Detroit taking on the Vegas Golden Knights, which will be a tough one. And then, the Ducks having a weakened Florida team. This isn't the Stanley Cup team by any means coming in to play them, but still a good challenge for the upstart Ducks, who are sitting in first place in their division right now.
NHL Wraparound comes up on Wednesday, and on our website, NHLWraparound.com. Patrick Hoffman's latest piece is on the New York Rangers' recent road trip as they return home to see if they can perhaps roll some of those winning ways on the road into Madison Square Garden. We've also got Neil's Nuggets. He'll be doing an installment or 2 this week. And Smith's Picks with your gaudy 62, 39, and 17 record after a 6-3-1 weekend.
You know what? Even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and then, and that's a lot of games to predict. But you know what? When you go through the standings and you look at how close the teams are, you take a look at tonight's 4 games. Edmonton at St. Louis. Well, that one, it should be Edmonton with the injuries that St. Louis have. It should be Edmonton win that. Vancouver at Nashville. Who knows? Chicago at Seattle. Who knows? Even Pittsburgh at Toronto. Who knows? I mean, these are not obvious picks when you make them. They're not.
That's why everybody turns to you.
Oh, well, let's hope so.
Enjoy the hockey Monday and Tuesday. We'll speak with you Wednesday on NHL Wraparound.